everybody, welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We are taking a look this last week before elections at, for those of you who have not voted yet, at two of the critical issues that are on referendum votes. Now, there are four questions that will be statewide dealing with redistricting and a redistricting commission. And there'll be one that deals with medical marijuana, one of the hot issues, another one that deals with a gas tax. We're going to start with medical marijuana. It's been a topic that's been in debate for 3 to 4 years. Joining us for our conversation are three people that take very different perspectives on it. From law enforcement, Sheriff Paul Wimmer from Tooele County, a pharmacist and a member of the state Senate, Evan Vickers, and a county commissioner from Box Elder County, Stan Summers, who is has some close connections on the medical use side of marijuana. So we will start with this and we will open this up. How did this end up getting onto the referendum instead of being dealt with in the Senate? And I'm going to throw that to our legislator here for a starter.
Well, thanks, Chad. Good question. So, you know, the challenge that we've had in the legislature, and we've been dealing with it for about 4 years, is that you're dealing with a substance that is considered illegal by federal law. And so the legislature has been very careful on how to approach that. It's very difficult to just throw it to the wind and say, well, we're going to violate federal law and move forward with something. I think that there's been a pretty good perspective that people recognize that there is some value there if we can just find a path that we can do it in a safe and productive way. So the challenge has been that we move incrementally. And so we've moved forward incrementally. Last year, myself and Representative Brad Daw passed a right to try bill and started the process and how medication would be delivered through, cannabis medication would be delivered. But it's not going fast enough for those that are advocates and would like to see the proposition go forward. So they put together this proposition, and it's on the ballot, and they've done hats off to them. They've done a great job in collecting the signatures and moving it forward. The challenge you have now is that it's like any other piece of legislation. That's what it is. It's a piece of legislation. The challenge for us is that as a legislature, we can go through a vetting process, multiple committees, and narrow it down, where they had just one shot at it, and it's on the ballot, and it's up or down with the public. And then, then it's up to the legislature to try to figure out how to implement.
And you guys just had a big compromise meeting here a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely, and I've been a part of that. And there is some really good language that's come together, and we've got people from both sides that I would never thought would be in the same room together have been working together on this to come together on language that is more acceptable to everyone involved. The legislature, I think that there's still those on the outside from the proposition would like to see it go farther. There's some people on the other side that would like to see nothing happen. But I think that we're moving forward in a very good compromise piece of legislation, and the governor's indicated that he will call us into special session and we'll move forward with that one way or the other on the ballot.
So I'm going to talk to Stan. You are more favorable about having access to medical marijuana.
Whatever you say, Chad.
So, what's your perspective about this ballot?
I think what
initiative?
Senator Vickers said, I've been a part of this for the last 4 years and trying to, implement it. We were there with the right to try bill, and the cannabis at the time we did the right to try bill was actually taken out of the right to try bill the first time we tried it, just for the plain fact that I don't think that they were ready to implement that. In the last little while, they actually gave it to the people that were on hospice, and you could do it for, I think, a 3-month period, and then if you were still alive, then you could go back again and get another 3-month period if you were still alive. So I think coming out of those couple things that there, like he said, there just wasn't enough for the broader sense of the people that, maybe needed it for other ailments. I am in total agreement with the fact that, the feds need to step up and actually do something with this to make it better for law enforcement. They need to get it to a Schedule 2 instead of a Class 1, to where everybody can actually legally do it. Hopefully, with the stuff that's going through with the compromise, that when it does pass, that some of us that need the medicine now will be able to cross state lines and to get it legally. I mean, my biggest problem with the thing all along is that everybody who's doing it illegally is already doing it illegally, and then there's those people that want to try to do it legally, can actually do it legally. So hopefully with this grand compromise, we'll be able to have the people have access that actually need it and do it legally.
The Sheriff's Association has not been very favorable about this.
We're mostly concerned about the slide into recreational. it's just watching other states being cautioned by our counterparts in Colorado and Oregon and other states, and watching it slide from a medical perspective into a recreational perspective is one of our biggest challenges or concerns with it. Yes, there is the element that it is against federal law, and we struggle, being a society that's ruled by law. We have a hard time anytime we're thumbing our nose at a statute, whether it be federal or state.
Would this create a problem for you in law enforcement, in that if you pull somebody over, drawing that line is, what is the situation I have on my hands? Is that a concern?
Yeah, well, Proposition 2 is especially troubling in that regard, because in Proposition 2 it's written in that it's presumed that they're possessing it legally. So you would have to have other evidence to suggest that they are somehow possessing it illegally. And so simply seeing marijuana sitting in a car does not give us sufficient evidence to search or anything of the sort. It's presumed, though rebutable, it is presumed that it's being legally possessed unless you have something to suggest otherwise. But simply the possession of marijuana or its tools or its devices for use is not illegal.
I want to take a quick break here. We actually have to deal with commercial. I want to come back and address how we move forward if it passes, what we do if it doesn't. Those will be our two questions when we come back. We'll be right back with the county seat.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
For the last 4 years, Bruce Cutler has fought for Murray, Midvale, and Sandy. As an 8-year veteran of the Murray School Board, he understands the impact the state can have on local education. With a career background in technology and software, he has helped make it easier to get online with the state and is a champion of the homeless. Find out more at electbrucecutler.org.
I'm Bruce Cutler, and I ask for your support to continue to serve Murray, Midvale, and Sandy as your state legislator. Oh, and by the way, I approved this ad.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Welcome back to the county seat, continuing our conversation about a couple of the initiatives on the ballot. We are talking about the medical marijuana, Proposition 2, I believe it is. So my next question, if this passes, are we going to be able to protect the citizenry, stop the slide, and be able to craft legislation that will keep it in a medical environment? Do you have a route forward on what's been dealt in the compromise? I know you've had a lot of structure in this because you've got a pharmacist point of view.
Absolutely. So at this point, it doesn't matter what happens on the ballot. It doesn't matter what happens in the election, whether Prop 2 passes or fails. The legislature and the governor have come together along with those groups from both sides and agreed on some language that we can move forward with. And so that language will be implemented in a special session, most likely in November or early December, right after the election. So if, let's say, go down to pass, if the proposition passes, it becomes law for a moment until the next piece of legislation is passed. And so that would be the compromise legislation. If the proposition fails, then the law is still the way it is now, and then when we pass the law in with the special session, then that becomes the law. And moving forward, it's a much safer path. It provides medication to a patient, so it meets those needs, but it does it in a fashion that we can control it, and quite frankly, minimize or eliminate the black market through the process as well.
Do you agree with that black market reduction, that if that you are honing it in a little bit better. You're still going to have enforcement problems, aren't you?
I don't think there's any question that law enforcement in general, though we haven't read through all 126 pages yet, at least I haven't personally, the compromise has some promise, and I think it's a better product than what Proposition 2 is producing.
So I have one last question. This actually came from a viewer who knew that we were going to be doing this. Don't we already have cannabinoid oils and some of the extracts available through prescription?
Honestly, it's just like going into different things that you get from a drugstore and things like that. Certain things don't work. You go into a doctor's office and maybe you're allergic to Augmentin, or you're allergic to this stuff. Some of the stuff that's coming out of what you're talking about, Marinol and all these other things, actually don't work for everybody. So I'm a diabetic and I have to have certain diabetic medicine, and I think it's the same thing that's going to happen with the cannabis thing. You're going to find out that different strains and different doses help different people at different avenues. So yes, that stuff's available, but I can tell you from personal experience with my son that the Marinol was actually more worse on him, that wasn't as good, less effective than anything else would have been. So I think sometimes you look at, some of the things that are happening. Like he said, I still think that if somebody pulls somebody over on I-80 coming from Wendover and they've got a bale of marijuana in the back of their car, I think you're going to say, well, okay, now wait a minute, isn't that to distribute? Or if they have 1,000 pills in the back of their car. I mean, some of these things are already happening. So I honestly don't think that they can slide, because I think the legislation is going to do a good job of trying to get it together. And people who want to do it recreational are already doing recreational. So I don't think it's going to be a problem at that point.
Would you rather see it pass or not pass? Down?
30% of them already are out there, and I think the last poll said it was going to pass 60-40. So
we would be against it passing.
Well, enough conversation on Proposition 2. We'll take up question 1 about the gas tax and school funding when we come back on the county seat.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Utah has a national treasure where winding canyons stretch to the horizon, where nature forms elegant structures, and where iconic monuments of the West stand tall. Visitors around the world come to get a glimpse of southern Utah's legendary landscape and landmarks. Join them and explore San Juan County, Utah's canyon country.
Bear Lake is rich in friendships and color this fall. Explore countless miles in some of Rich County's best off-road trails. Whether you enjoy the pace fast or slow, there will be plenty for you to explore. Vibrant reds and yellows await you in this magnificent landscape. Come spend some time with us this fall exploring our trails. Rich County.
149 million years in the making. Dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are going to our second position and taking up question 1. Just kind of how it works sometimes. Joining us for a conversation about the gas tax question that is on your ballot are 2 commissioners that have a lot of experience with roads. Tooele County Commissioner Sean Milne, Darren Bushman, who is a commissioner from Paiute County. And I appreciate both of you taking the time to join us today. So, basically, question 1, as it's been described by the people who support it, is that it's not really an education tax as being hoisted as a tax on fuel. What it is we're putting a dedicated tax on fuel so that the general funding that has been taken and given to road maintenance can be applied to education at a ratio of 70%, and 30% of that money will still go to the counties to pay for roads, along with the tax that they get in addition. So they say it's not really an education tax on fuel. What say you?
I'd say that's a shell game. I mean, why do we want to fund education this route? Why not straightforward and honest with the public and fund education the way we've designed to fund education, and that's through property taxes, school trust lands administration, etc. The other thing about the question is there's much vagueness to the question. There's a lot of question, you know, as you know from previous gas tax increases. How do we distribute it? Is it point of collection? Does it, you know, is it a population-based distribution? The current formula, as you know, is incredibly complex. So in the last gas tax increase, there was a big debate after the tax passed through of how that distribution was. And a lot of urban counties felt really slighted about how that distribution was. A lot of rural counties felt distribution was slighted as well after it was renegotiated. So there's a ton of questions.
So, Commissioner Milne, what say you?
I agree with Commissioner Bushman. I think that as complex as accounting methods already are for tax distribution and collection, that a simplified approach is probably the best. I mean, we've all heard the acronym Keep It Simple Stupid, right? So KISS. Let's keep this simple. If there are those that feel sales tax distribution has been improperly, in their view, moved from education funding to transportation funding, then fix that. And then likewise, let's keep the gas tax solely for road maintenance and construction. Right now we know that it's woefully underfunded. It doesn't even come close to just maintaining in Tooele County our true costs. So let's make sure that transportation related labeling is transportation related expenses. Help us do our job easier.
But as the opponents describe it, they would say that it indeed is transparent, because they're just saying general funds that had usually been shifted to transportation, a portion of those will now be shifted to education, but the gas tax really is the gas tax. It'll be used for transportation.
Well, it's a marketing game, Chad. The reality of it is it's a lot easier to sell funding for school children than it is to sell funding for roads. And so this has been played out, in my opinion, as a marketing game. We also know that gas tax is a challenge in today's environment with the advent of electric vehicles and all of the other things. We now have vehicles that are running our roads and using our roads that don't consume an ounce of gasoline, right? So the question is fuel tax even the right approach to funding roads at this point? I'll tell you another thing that comes into play. If you look at a percentage of household income, rural Utah spends a much larger percentage of their household income on fuel than urban Utah. We don't drive 3 blocks and get on the tracks and go to work, or jump on the bus in our front yard and go to work. We drive 62 miles a day to work every day, okay? You know, we were down in the Robbers Roost area. One of our ranchers has a ranch in Robbers Roost. He also has a ranch clear on the west side of Utah, all the way on the Nevada border. So these people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars on fuel a year comparative to our urban counterparts. Then if you take that, Chad, and you look at, okay, where are all the school children in the state in numbers? 4 counties in urban Utah. That's pretty much where we are. So we're going to unfairly burden rural Utah to fund education for urban Utah. That's their argument, right? There's no details in question 1 about how the fuels tax is going to be allocated and dispersed. What about points of collection? All of the details that aren't there. It's really a very vague question for the voters to try and make a decision on. And I think this confusion of calling it for education when it's really for roads and playing the shell game, I think it's just a bad deal.
Your chance for rebuttal.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree entirely with that. Again, I hadn't even thought of prior to Commissioner Bushman just noting that rural and urban divide and how that might come into play here. I think that's a very prudent thing to bring up, and it's certainly not addressed in the question. Don't see any narrative of that in the voter information pamphlet, but it's something that certainly should be considered. You know, all too often, politicians, we are tempted to behave very, very quickly. And I think just like your last panel on Proposition 2 addressed, sometimes the more methodical approach, while stretching out the timeline and can be very frustrating to certain demographics that we are elected to serve, is probably the prudent thing. After all, if any of these were simple, they'd have already been solved. And they would have been solved by people before us, and probably at a lot less cost than what we end up spending to fix many of these problems. But having this conversation here, I hope and I trust that it did take place up at the state, so I don't discount that it did. But all too often, local legislators at the city, the town, and the county level are excluded from some of that, and yet we're the ones who are engaged the most with the populace because of the very nature of being local elected officials. And when we don't have that explanation because we aren't brought into the conversation early on, that can hurt the chances of something like this passing, even if it's a good thing. Now, again, I'm going to go back and say that I wish that we could do something like gas tax, and I think that Commissioner Bushman brings up a very good debatable point, and that is the gas tax the way it's always been done the most appropriate way for us to continue doing it going forward with new vehicle technology, greater miles per gallon? Well, you know what? A $1.2 million stretch of 2-lane asphalt paved road in a rural county like ours, if we're to continue maintaining these so that these assets don't fail, we need to have that revenue stream. Public education needs to have an appropriate revenue stream. I'm not one of those that believes that the gas tax is the proper place to blend those two together. I want education regardless of another vehicle to succeed. I need road maintenance at the county level where we don't do anything with public education to succeed. And I think that the simpler form for the taxpayer to understand is to make sure that these labels match the intended use.
Okay, very good. We're going to talk about a solution right after this break.
This is what adventure looks like, and here's what it sounds like. Southwest Utah's Iron County offers some of the most iconic trails within the state that include 200 miles of new trails to be discovered. Check out ironcounty.net for info and interactive maps for your complete guide to off-roading. Explore countless miles of trails in the heart of Dixie National Forest, the gateway to Utah National Parks, Iron County.
What is the future of rural Utah? That is a question I'm asked all the time as the Republican candidate for House District 73. In a government that values the consent of the governed, those answers should come from rural Utah. I've learned more about those issues than I can share with you in 30 seconds. So I invite you to find out where I stand on grazing, roads, jobs, water, and schools on my website, lymanforutah.com. I've paid for this ad so that you can be an informed voter on Election Day. I'm Phil Lyman, Republican for District 73, and I approve this ad.
Crisp, colorful, a world in transition. You don't have to travel the back roads of Maine to explore autumn in all of its glory. Beaver County offers fall in unique splendor, with drives along forgotten canyons and hikes through meadows exploding with vibrant hues of red and yellow. Hit the road with your family and discover a side of Beaver County you never knew you were missing. Autumn is fleeting, so don't hesitate. Beaver County, it's time to experience the real Utah.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about question 1, which is my question. All the other statewide referendum votes are propositions. 1 is a question. It sounds like it's less binding. Is it less binding?
Oh, you'll have to ask the legal experts for that. I just play one on TV. I
I mean, it really is a question, and it doesn't. There is no binding piece of legislation to support it. I mean, it really has to go from there and go through the legislative process to arrive at something. So, really, the voters are being asked a question on something that there's absolutely no details fleshed out at this point.
I think it gives a good, poll. That's certainly what it's intended to do for maybe even this dialogue right here. I hope that more citizens pay attention to things like this and engage us at the local level as well as their state representatives and senators.
So we just went through our first gas tax increase in a number of years, what, 2 years ago? And it had some distribution problems on it that had to be tweaked. And so now we're looking at adding another 10 cents. There are many who feel like, oh great, they're adding 10 cents while gas prices drop, but they also remember not too many years ago when gas was sitting right at the cusp of $4 a gallon, and now you're looking at $4.10. If prices go up that much, doesn't that create a lot of burden that might be an economic crippler?
It may very well, but the reality remains, roads are expensive. And I think that far too often, I didn't know before I was a county commissioner, even as a part-time city councilman before, I knew that they were very expensive. I knew that these were a big hit to our municipal budget. But I didn't truly know, even then, and certainly not prior to then, just how expensive that road in front of my house is, and the road that connects from my neighborhood to the next neighborhood until it gets to Main Street. Asphalt is not cheap. The same cost that we pay out of our pocket as residents, your municipal and county and statewide government entities, they have the same thing to do to their vehicle fleet. Those that actually put that pavement down or the slurry seal on top of it, it's equally expensive. When the price per barrel goes up, it goes up to those of us that are trying to provide that service. And if it does over several years like it did during the Great Recession, I can understand how that impacts the household budget, but it impacts your local government as well, and we need to maintain those roads. So yes, it's certainly going to be felt at the pocketbooks, as it is so too by the government entities that serve the people.
Any thoughts?
Well, I just think whenever we look at anything like this, Chad, we need to look at it so that it's a fair tax. I think we have to look across the state. We have to understand that we have urban and rural people. Rural people don't have access to tracks. They don't have bus systems. They run a lot more miles than our urban counterparts. So I think, we've got to look at this stuff and we have to look at it across the state.
As evidenced by the fact that both of you drove well over 30 miles to get to this conversation today.
Yeah, mine will be about 400.
About 400.
Well, mine's correct. 300, but only 30 miles back.
I know somebody's going to be very pleased you said that. Anyway, that's all the time we have. Election day is coming up. If you haven't cast your ballot, we hope this gives you some clarity on a couple of the issues, what we feel are the more important issues here at the county seat. And remember, local government is where your life happens. Be engaged, be part of the solution, and we'll see you next week on the county seat.